Hi, welcome back to another Discipler Group. We're glad that you've joined us. We begin a two-part series looking at conflict. I know when we hear the word conflict, we want to run the other way. But it's my sense that conflict can be a healthy dynamic. Yes, we all don't want to experience conflict, but conflict really helps us to stretch and to grow. When we begin to think about it, conflict is really two different ideas trying to gain the same space at the same time. They come clashing together, merging in this space. Two different ideas coming together in the same space. As we begin to look at conflict as something that gives us possibilities, gives us opportunities to clarify expectations, we can begin to move in healthy ways as we work with conflict. Over these next two sessions, you'll be hearing from people that talk about conflict. Today, we're blessed to have with us Reverends Rod Miller and Karen Walker, two outstanding pastors in our Baltimore-Washington conference, but also two people who are skilled at working with people around conflict. Again, thank you for coming. I'm so glad you're here and your willingness to continue to stretch and grow. I look forward to how we can continue to grow into healthy ways of being the church.
Hello, I'm Rod Miller. I'm a guide in the Baltimore region. I'm the Director of Connectional Ministries on conference staff with the conference. And I'm also a participant in the Roundtable Ministries, which works with conflict in our conference. And I'm really glad that you're watching this DVD.
Hello, I am Karen Walker. I'm a pastor in the Baltimore-Washington Conference, St. Paul's Church in Kensington. I am the director of the Roundtable Ministries team and in our conference. Everyone experiences conflict, and we're talking about one of my favorite subjects. Conflict is normal, it can be energizing, and there's great possibility that can come from conflict. The Roundtable Ministries team has been in existence since 1992. It started out, though, as the conflict management team, but it's morphed over time. And we have a greater opportunity to work in churches that are in conflict now than we did then, in a variety of different ways. Our primary focus these days is to mediate and to help laity and pastors learn how to be a mediative presence in the midst of conflict in local congregations. One of the key focuses of the Roundtable Ministries team is preventive maintenance stuff, so that we prevent conflict from being destructive before it gets going in that direction.
Yeah, we've worked with pastors, we've worked with SPRCs, we've worked with congregations as a whole, sometimes with pastors and staff. A lot of times conflict has to do with a pastor and a relationship or relationships that the pastor has in the congregation. And Roundtable is kind of set up to be able to work in any of those settings and kind of customize and tailor it to whatever it is that the specific context is in need of.
Right now we have teams working in 5 different places. This year, since annual conference of last year, we've been in about 15 congregations, either those that have been in conflict in a crisis sense or those who are looking for training for their staff parish committees or for church councils or for key lay leadership.
We find it's helpful to do preventive training, really, with SPRCs and with groups like that so that they can get an understanding of what conflict is about, some of the processes involved in conflict so that they can recognize it and then be able to minister and to work with it and manage it rather than let it take over.
And a key way that we work is as a 2-person team, usually a clergy person and a lay person, as we work with churches in crisis.
If you remember, a few months ago, we talked about a 3-stage process, kind of a constellation of leadership having to do with honoring, disrupting, and aligning all around a vision. What we, I think, realized in our discipler groups is when you disrupt around a vision, that often leads, and most often will lead to some kind of conflict, some kind of of coming up against one another around how to move forward. And they're often very, very healthy, very useful and needed discussions which come, but they also carry a lot of energy, and sometimes it's energy that can be positive or can be negative. What we want to do is disrupt around a vision towards greater wholeness, which can bring hope and energy in a congregation. The disruption is a very positive thing when we manage it and work with it in terms of moving forward towards the vision.
And by using good practices in working through the conflict, it can be a very constructive time and a very energizing time for the congregation. So our hope through this Discipler Month and the next few will be to provide for you some tools in working with healthy practices and good practices so that conflict in your congregation can be constructive.
We will have 3 discipler group sessions focusing on conflict. This is the first one, and it has to do with understanding conflict, the basic understandings of the processes going on when conflicts occur.
The second session will deal with engaging conflict well. You will receive a very valuable resource, a theological and biblical reflection on how to engage conflict well, as well as some practical resources so that you can understand further how you deal with conflict in ways that the congregation may deal with conflict.
And the third session will have to do with shalom ministries, and restorative justice. And you may be aware of retributive justice. Restorative justice is a way of thinking about restoring relationships and how we can be healing and bringing wholeness in our relationships.
A few years ago, our denomination established a center for mediation and reconciliation called Just Peace. The executive director of that is Tom Porter. Tom is an elder in the United Methodist Church. He's also an attorney in his former life, as he likes to say. And he is a guru in the area of conflict mediation within congregations and other organizations.
And Roundtable has spent some time with Tom and has learned quite a bit from him around dealing with conflict creatively.
So listen to his wisdom on this subject.
I read a study recently from the Hartford Seminary, which says that the greatest predictor of decline in a church is the presence of conflict. I also saw another study that said that ministers spend 40% of their time in conflict or working with conflict. And when they were asked whether they received any preparation for doing so, they all responded little or none. The report from the Hartford Seminary says that the most important gift we could give our ministers is training in how to deal with conflict constructively. So you all are ahead of the curve, and that's what we're going to work on today. Let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I am a Methodist minister, but I'm also a trial lawyer. I spent 25 years trying cases. And during that time, I saw the problems in our relational world up close and personal. I also saw, up close and personal, the adversarial retributive system. And over time, I developed a lover's quarrel with this system, and it became more serious. My sense was that it was not conducive to the telling of truth. It most often, if not always, heightened conflict instead of resolving it. It was not conducive to building new relationships. It was not conducive to creating a space where we could live out our Christian vocation of forgiveness and reconciliation. I also experienced this adversarial retributive system in the church, believe it or not. We adopted it whole hog into our grievance procedure. And moreover, as I observed life in our church and differences and disagreements, I discovered that this is a way that we treat each other when we disagree. So out of all these experiences, I knew that we needed to find a better way. Now, my first experience in this search for a better way was in the study and practice of mediation, where a third party brings people together to tell their stories, to get beneath their positions to their interests and needs, and to resolve their own problems. What a thrill for this trial lawyer who always worked from two tables to work at one table. This was a moment of real conversion for me. I began to understand, as I never had before, the full meaning of the body of Christ. I was assisted in this by the African concept of Ubuntu, which Bishop Tutu says is a great gift of Africa to the world. This is the understanding that we are all interconnected, we are all interdependent, we are who we are because of our relationships. As Bishop Tutu says, when I dehumanize you, I dehumanize myself. The second thing I learned was the power of the telling and the hearing of stories. And I saw how people responded to authentic, truthful stories in ways that they'd never responded before in South Africa. I discovered the power of forgiveness. I'd heard a lot of sermons about it. I'd preached them myself. But here I saw it practiced. And I understood that Bishop Tutu was right. There is no future without forgiveness. And this is what Jesus taught us. This is the only way out of the cycles of violence and retribution in this world.
So conflict gets started in churches in a lot of different ways. And by the way, just so that our colleagues know, 90% of conflicts within the life of a church involve the pastor. And the reason for that is because, pastor, if you're not for me, then you must be against me. It can start in a very simple way. On a Sunday morning, someone may be walking out of church and just throw a pot shot your way.
It's a zinger. And the zinger is, Pastor, how come you didn't come to our United Methodist men's breakfast yesterday morning? We were all expecting you, and it seems like you haven't been coming to our Methodist men's breakfast lately.
Or, Pastor, why haven't we sung my favorite hymn in the last 6 months?
Or, Pastor, what is it with these Advent songs? How come we don't get to sing Christmas carols anymore?
Or, Pastor, can't we use the fellowship hall for the bingo group that would like to meet on Tuesdays?
Or, Pastor, is your spouse going to be coming to this event? We haven't seen her lately.
So you get the idea. POTSHOTS is actually an acronym for Pastors on the Spot. Generally, there are 3 reasons for these to occur. A member is hurting and needs your attention.
Or a member is in opposition to a value you have or to a ministry that you have for some reason.
Or third, a member is testing you.
Again, remember that pastors are involved in 90% of church conflicts. There's an assumption that if you're not with me, you must be against me.
There is no middle ground when you are the pastor.
Now we're going to stop the tape for 2 minutes and ask the question, what pot shots have you experienced? We're going to be offering you 3 tools today as a way for you to understand conflict. And the first tool that we'd like to present is called Rivers.
R is for relationships. There can be conflict among staff members. There can be conflict between clergy and laity. There can be conflict between groups that use the church, as well as individual members within the congregation. The I is for information. Sometimes we have formal communication systems within the life of a church. Sometimes the informal communication systems are the ones that work best, such as parking lot meetings or the phone chain. But these often can be very divisive and cause conflict. The V is for values. In congregations, not everyone has the same values. Oftentimes, there can be a conflict around differing values that people or groups within the congregation hold. The next I is for interests. In congregations, not everybody is interested in the same thing. There may be a group of folks very much interested in volunteer and mission trips, while others believe that the money raised for missions ought to be kept at home. The next R is for resources. In our congregations, we find that there is a shortage of resources. Sometimes it can be money. Sometimes the shortage can be space or staff. And whenever there is a shortage of vital resources, there's competition for those resources, and that can be a source of conflict. And the last S is for structure. In congregations where there is an unclear organizational structure, there is ripe ground for conflict. For instance, who is it that will set the price for the ham dinner to be had on Saturday? Is it the United Methodist Women? Is it the Finance Committee? Or is it the ham dinner group? Everybody may have their own opinion about whose decision it is to be. These are some of the most basic reasons why there is conflict within the life of a congregation. How we deal with those will determine whether a conflict is constructive or destructive. Our goal in sharing those with you is to help you be able to identify what is causing conflict in the life of your congregation, and therefore get a better understanding of it. Here's another tool that you might find useful in understanding conflict in your congregation, and it's called levels of conflict. The Alban Institute has a schema that helps identify the level of intensity of a conflict in a congregation. And there are 5 levels. Level 1 is the least amount of conflict. Level 5 is an extreme amount of conflict.
The first level of conflict is called a problem. A problem is simply when people have differing views about how to handle a situation.
The second level of conflict is disagreement. People do not easily come to resolution about something around which they disagree.
The third level of conflict is a contest, and a contest is when definite sides are almost chosen. People are either on one side or the other, and there are spokesmen or spokespersons who are now speaking for each side.
Level 4 is fight or flight. People choose to fight it out to the end, and the primary purpose at level 4 is to win the fight. Others will choose to leave because they don't want to be involved in the fight. At this level, too, there's more a focus on principle than the issue. In fact, the sides would be hard-pressed to figure out what the initial issue is.
Fifth level of conflict is called intractable. Intractable is where the two sides have now become very hardened to the point where there is no way out. There's no way to come to an agreement at this point. The entire system or church suffers at this point because there's no way to work through this. There's only a winner or a loser. There isn't a way to reach win-win. It's now just cut your losses and go forward.
When the Roundtable Ministries team gets involved in a church in crisis, we really like to be called in at level 3. It takes less time to work through a conflict at level 3 than when it gets to level 4 and 5.
We realize that all churches experience conflict really all of the time, but most of the time that would be in levels 1 or 2. When we get to level 3 and the sides are really chosen, that is when we can be most helpful in helping you reach an agreement, a mediation around that conflict. Once you get to level 4 and 5,
you're right. At level 4 and 5, if your congregation is at level 4 or 5 conflict, chances are the only way out for you in a constructive way is for there to be outside mediation. So now you have a tool to help you understand the causes of conflict in the church. You also have a tool that will help you assess at what level the conflict is. We want to give you one more tool that we think will be valuable as you are involved in decision-making processes within the life of the church.
Most often, the best way to make a decision is to practice collaboration. Collaboration means both parties come to the table with open ideas and they brainstorm together toward a solution. Collaboration is a process that takes a lot of time. However, the blessing of a win-win decision is felt by everyone.
The second best strategy in the decision-making process is to create options. By having more than two choices, one does not simply win or lose, but has the chance to make a decision based on what he or she thinks is best.
The third box in our triangle is a compromise. With the decision to compromise, both parties win something and they also lose something. Compromises are more easily forgotten and often not seriously put into action by either party.
The fourth tool is creating obstacles. Sometimes it is necessary for a decision to be held off, or there is a realization by the leadership that the timing is not good, or that there will not be broad affirmation about a decision. This strategy can be very effectively used by good leaders who are desiring the ideal buy-in from a group or committee.
The fifth approach in making decisions is to compel. Often those with experience or authority will strongly lobby for their view to be held by all. This strategy is powerful and helpful on occasion. However, for a leader to use it consistently, it will create a sense of ill will and resentment.
6, collude and coerce represent two ways that decisions are made which are manipulative and destructive. These decisions will cause dysfunction among the group and will need to be revisited. Leadership changes often will occur.
Finally, the strategy that causes more conflict than any other is to concede. There just is not enough passion or interest or energy around a cause or issue, and those involved give up without thought or concern.
We've described for you today 3 tools that we hope will help you understand the kind of conflict and the level of conflict in your congregation.
We have to say, if you haven't needed them yet, you
You
will.
will.